Hello everyone, it's Mystic Juicer here with another episode of Getting Good at Yomi. Today we are going to cover my favorite topic, Grapplers. So as any fighting game worth its salt will have, Yomi also has Grapplers among its cast. They are some of my favorite characters in terms of design and theme, and I'm super excited to get a chance to talk about them today. So the three grapplers of the cast, Trock, Rook, and Midori, have a couple of strong similarities between them. They all have dominant normal throws, which means that they have a lot of throws on their normal cards that are below 7.0 speed. So if you just have a look at their character cards, for instance, you can see Trock has 2, 3, 4, 5 throws, Rook 2, 3, 6, 7, and Midori 2, 3, 4, 5. So lots and lots of options that are going to outspeed every single throw a non-grappler has. You can also see that they tend to have slower but more damaging normal attacks than the rest of the cast. All of their normal attacks start on rank 4, so they don't have normal attacks of speed 2 or 3. And their normal attacks also include ranks higher than 6, so 7 and 8, 7, 8, and 10, and 7 and 8. All of them have an innate way of punishing normal attacks as well. They all have, as part of their character abilities, the ability called Defensive Mastery. What that does is when any of these characters successfully blocks a normal attack, their opponent is not going to get the regular draw that they ordinarily would in any other situation. All three of them also have some abilities that really punish normal attacks. All three of them have throw sides to their aces that deal incredible amounts of damage, as you can see from the character cards here. And finally, they have very few dodges. So Trock and Midori both have 2 ranks of dodges, and Rook doesn't have any dodges at all. So this common set of design principles basically means that grapplers can't rival the attack speeds of non-grapplers without spending significant resources, either a 2-ace attack move that all three of them have that sits around 1.0 speed, or special moves, or combat reveal abilities. In a non-grappler matchup, the typical way that the slower character gets around their speed deficiency in terms of attacks is by dodging a lot. And as we discussed, none of these characters has dodges that they can just freely play. And none of them have a very significant ability to punish off of their dodges outside of their ace super throws. Midori being a bit of an exception. He has some better dodge follow-up than the other two. So what this means in a grappler versus non-grappler matchup is that the safest option for the non-grappler is to attack often. Their attacks will mostly beat the grappler's attacks, with some exception. Their attacks will also beat the grappler's throws, again with some exception. And grapplers can't deal significant damage off of their few dodges. And there you see why Defensive Mastery is such an important ability for these characters to have in their kit. When a character with Defensive Mastery blocks normal attack, their opponent doesn't draw a card like they ordinarily would, and that means that non-grapplers have a difficult road to building up those scary high damage hands. Their blocks are going to be vulnerable to throws, and they can't even hedge against being thrown with their own throws. And attacks are unreliable against grappler blocking. Put all of those details together, and what you get is a warrior of attrition, where grappler is going to block out all of the good cards in the non-grappler's hand, and then consistently deal not great damage, but good damage off of any of their throws, and anything else they can sneak in. All of these characters also have fairly high health compared to the rest of the cast, which means that they can take a bit of punishment so long as they're able to reduce the efficiency of their opponent's hand by blocking and throwing them a lot. So typically, especially in the early game, but just over the length of the match, unless a grappler has a really compelling reason to mix it up, they can deal with any combat reveal from their opponent with only 2 moves, blocks and throws. Blocking is good for a non-grappler, blocking is great for a grappler. They're going to beat attacks and jokers and keep their opponents from building a hand while increasing their own hand. Throws will beat blocks, dodges, and their opponent's throws, whittling away at their opponent's health and confidence, and keeping their hand low. So in other words, if their opponent is going to attack, and just generally a grappler wants to block, block is going to beat any attacks, or most attacks, with some exception. And if their opponent is going to do anything else, then the grappler wants to throw. The scariest thing that can happen to a non-grappler is to try to throw a grappler and walk into one of those huge normal attacks, and take even more damage than they would have if they'd just gotten thrown. Also, if things aren't going their way in the mid or late game, the grappler can always threaten massive damage against their opponent's dodges, blocks, and throws with their lightning speed super throw attacks. You can tell all of these super throws are 0.0 speed, so they're scary even to other grapplers. So how do you play against a grappler? First of all, jokers are very important. Against Trock and Midori, who can dodge into their super throws, it's very important to keep in mind that you're probably going to want that resource if they get into a situation where they have their super throw available. Against Rook, who has no dodges and has to play his 4-ace super throw honestly, you don't need to conserve a joker to deal with it. You can just defend yourself with attacks. So it's generally better to gold burst against Rook than the other 2 grapplers. Make sure that when you're dealing damage to a grappler, you're dealing efficient damage, which keeps your hand relatively high, and keep something to defend against throws in your hand. Nothing is worse than facing a grappler with 4 cards in hand, and the only thing you have are 7s, 8s, and 9s, and that's going to lose to constant throw spam. That's not to say that you should be afraid of throwing. Grapplers like to block. All of them like to have a high hand. And keep in mind that unlike in another matchup where the speed of your throws matters relative to your opponent, all of your throws are the same. So don't worry about throwing with a 10. It's going to get crushed just as badly by a counter throw as a 7 throw would. Finally, don't panic. You are going to get thrown. Make peace with this. Don't spam attacks into your opponent's blocks until you have no ammo left in the tank, and then just watch yourself get wrecked over the next 7 or 8 turns. I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences between the 3 grapplers in a little bit of depth. I'm not going to go into the same depth as a guide. This is just a very, very quick overview of all 3 characters, so that, if you're the kind of person who really likes the grappler playstyle, you really like playing Geef, it'll give you a sense of what the differences between these 3 awesome characters is. So we have Trock, our well-meaning bullman beast, who gets huge and buff when he blocks. He's the simplest of the 3 grapplers to learn and understand, so if you're curious about trying out a grappler, maybe start with him. Unlike any other character in the game, Trock doesn't get to keep his blocks when they beat an attacker joker. Instead, up to 2 of his blocks get attached to his character card, and give all of his normal attacks and throws +1 damage each. So once he's got 2 blocks attached, if he throws and follows up with an 8 attack, that's 20 damage off 2 cards, which is pretty sweet. Because his blocks don't stick around, it means that Trock has a harder time building a hand than any other grappler, or any other character for that matter. He also has the most efficient answers to normals and 1.0 speed attacks with his Jack, Queen, and King cards. His super throw only deals a puny 45 damage, and he has to have 2 blocks attached to himself before he can use it, but it also only costs 3 aces to use, so it's a little bit easier for him to power up and get it. Rook is a giant stone golem and has no dodges. He has some special one-use blocks that can reflect damage or knock his enemies over and give Rook a speed boost next turn. And because these are special blocks instead of dodges, he has powerful damage-dealing defensive options even when he's knocked down, unlike the other 2 grapplers. His normal throws don't combo, so they're only ever going to cost him a single card, but they're only ever going to deal 10 damage. Which is nothing to sneeze at, but it doesn't lead into the 20 damage of Trock's follow-up, or even the 16 damage of Midori's. He has a very powerful ability that lets him armor through enemy attacks with his slow but brutal normal attacks. He'll take damage as normal from his enemy's combo, but gets to hit back with his own. Finally, probably the most complicated of the 3 grapplers to learn and understand, there's Midori, who's a wise martial artist who can transform into a powerful dragon. He has special moves that can't be dodged using dodges on normals. The only way you're going to dodge those moves is if you're one of the few characters who has a dodge on Jack, Queen, King, or Ace. But he can't use those moves unless he's activated his Dragon Form ability by playing a 2 as a special move, or by discarding one of his precious dodges to temporarily be able to use that move. When he uses a 2 to activate Dragon Form, he can only combat reveal dragon moves, or blocks and dodges. Also, if he blocks an attack or Joker in Dragon Form, he can pick up any non-Joker card from his discard and put it back in his hand instead of drawing a card normally. The only way to get him out of that Dragon Form is to throw him, which is pretty scary, especially since you can't dodge into it reliably. Of all the grapplers, he has the fewest answers to attacks of speed 1.0 or faster. But he can also dodge into the most damaging super throw of any of the 3 grapplers, and his Queen is among the fastest and most damaging sub 1.0 speed moves in the game, rivaling some other characters' aces. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope you've learned a little bit about what makes grapplers awesome and how they work. And hopefully you'll feel a little more confident when you face one in ranked or in a tournament. As always, thank you for watching. Leave a comment if you have any questions or any comments, and enjoy yourself some Yomi.